Welcome to maybe one of the most important videos I've ever done. This isn't just a video talking about Boise State season expectations, which while those are important and exciting, they're not as important as this. This isn't a video talking purely about conference realignment and who may be coming next and where the next shift may happen. Because again, while those are interesting and entertaining, and while maybe they'll come true, those are not as important as what we're going to talk about today. What we are talking about today on this channel is an issue with a system, an issue with a mindset. We're going to talk about the reasons that this mindset exists, the reasons that it is flawed, the facts that show that this mindset is completely backwards in thinking and hurting teams inside and outside of the system, and also show what the correct mindset should be. What's that mindset we're talking about? Well, it's the approach to conference realignment. If you clicked on this video, maybe it's because of one of the teams that are in the header image for the photo, or because of the overall title, which is, teams that should never be considered for conference realignment discussion, or should not be part of conference realignment. And while we are going to talk about specific teams that present cases for why this mindset is flawed, this isn't necessarily about those specific teams. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the data, the statistics that show that those teams should never be considered for conference realignment. But it's not just about them. Every single year when conference realignment discussion comes around, you end up hearing about programs that would never have crossed your radar before, and probably never did cross your radar because they probably weren't doing anything on the football field. But suddenly they're a top group of 5 expansion candidate. Where does this mindset come from? Where do these teams come from? Boise State should be the top team, right? That's what the assumption is. You look back at their history of success, you look at their multiple Fiesta Bowls, that's what everybody assumed, is that at some point Boise State would get the call up. And yet when conference realignment came around, it was UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, SMU, all of these teams at San Diego State, USF, UNLV, programs that have done far less than what Boise State has done, and in some cases, not even on the same plane of comparison, are being looked at as top expansion candidates, and Boise State slips further and further and further down the list. Why is that? We're going to talk about that today. So first off, number one overall, is because the TV execs and the conference administrators, the conference leadership, they have a misaligned priorities. They focus on TV markets, regional TV markets, and academics. And this kind of thinking rewards circumstances over your city that you happen to be over, or the date that your school was founded, which is part of what impacts academics overall. They reward your circumstances versus rewarding hard work, determination, and success. It's feudalist, and frankly, it's un-American in its approach to conference expansion. This idea that there's just some teams that will never be good enough, no matter what they do, no matter what they put on the field, no matter the hard work and the on-field success, none of that matters. It's all about who you're associated with, what your royalty status is, what your bloodlines are, the city you happen to be a part of. It's completely against the very ideas that America is supposed to be based on, and our sports are supposed to be representative of that, correct? Worse than that, however, worse than it just simply being a completely biased and unfair system, worse than that, it's actually backwards. It actually is no longer relevant. This system, this mindset no longer works, and it hurts people both outside the system and inside it. It keeps deserving teams from elevating to a place that they have earned, but also it keeps those within the system from being able to experience the maximum profit potential that they would otherwise be able to receive by shifting and changing their mindset with the shifting landscape of college football. College football is not the same universe that it was 40 years ago, 20, or even 10 years ago. College football is in a completely different age. There was once a time, 20 to 40, even 10 years ago, that cable TV created a captive audience. What mattered most wasn't necessarily how good the team was, but how many people lived near that team, how many people would have to watch that program no matter how good they were. However, that's no longer the case. Less than 40%, or 40% of Americans is the last poll, and decreasing every year. So probably by the time this video is coming out, it's less than that already. But 40% or less of Americans are on cable TV. We're in a digital age. You have ESPN, Hulu TV, YouTube TV, whatever. This is not like an ad for streaming services, but you get the idea. All of those cable cutting options exist out there. And not only are more channels available on a typical streaming service than you would typically have gotten for cable, people, but you can watch pretty much any college football game that happens anywhere in the country with very few exceptions. It's no longer, unless it's like Pac-12 Network, which thank God that's dead, with the exception of maybe the Pac-12 Network, it no longer matters what region you are in. You can watch any football game anywhere at any time. You no longer have a captive audience. They have other options. If the team that is in their area doesn't have a strong brand, if it doesn't have a consistent history of success, if they weren't part of that fan base to begin with, they can go to other places digitally and watch those games and be part of that fan base, even from a remote distance. There's a fallacy that exists of the local team somehow drawing in all of the potential viewership of that area. And while that may be true for small towns, for small areas, it is not true for the larger cities, the ones that are truly desirable in the traditional means of conference expansion. While 72% of Americans do still tend to live near their where they were born or where their parents lived, for large cities, that is not the case. The majority of that population for large cities, especially cities that are growing at an exponential rate, those are not people that were born there. Those are people that are coming in, that are influxing. Look at Tampa, a city that's grown approximately 1 million people in 20 years. Vegas, 2 million. San Diego, another 2 million. All of those cities show massive, rapid expansion. And while that may look lucrative for someone, a TV exec looking at it from a traditional TV market, actually it decreases their potential value. The incoming residents bring their own teams. They bring their own loyalties. If the local team doesn't have a strong brand, a strong recognizable brand, if it doesn't have a consistent history of success, if it doesn't have strong local regional fan base loyalties that can help indoctrinate the new incoming people to their way of sportsmanship, their market is actually going to become more saturated for those programs. They're going to become a smaller voice in a larger marketplace of people that don't care and have their own associations. Now they're having to compete with more and more teams that may not even be inside of their local area. And it gets far worse. The situation becomes far worse when you actually aren't even the loudest voice in your local area, in your town, when there's the presence of professional teams or worst case, inside the city limits Power 5, or even just nearby Power 5, or I guess now Power 4 programs. So unless you're already an established, nationally recognized team, Power 4 team, unless you're like a Clemson or a Florida State, or even one of the smaller Power 4 teams that currently exist and is on a recognizable scale and plays in a recognizable Power 4 conference, or if you are a recognizable brand like, say, Boise State with the blue turf, where everybody knows about you, whether or not they have watched Mountain West games or not, they know about you. If you don't have something significantly unique about you, if you don't have a long history of success, if you don't have that Power 4 name, the incoming people, they're not going to care about you. They would care about you the same way as they would about an FCS team that's in their school. They just don't think about you on the same level. If you're a group of 5 program in a large city basin area, you're not going to attract the new viewership. And even if you do accelerate up to the Power 5, you are so far behind the curve that it's going to take you so long to be able to actually maximize your potential. And that is dependent on whether or not you can make the jump, make the transition, and translate that into winning success to win over viewership. Let's look at a few examples. Let's look at San Diego State, USF, and UNLV. 3 of the bigger names, bigger city areas that have been thrown around in conference expansion as top potential expansion candidates. Starting with San Diego State. Well, San Diego State's got a massive problem because they have multiple NFL teams either inside their city limits until recently or nearby. San Diego Chargers obviously are gone. They're now the LA Chargers, but they're only 2 hours away. Same with the Los Angeles Rams, and then to a lower extent, just same state but not same area, San Francisco 49ers. But you have 2 major NFL franchises that have a history of being in your area, of building fan bases in your area that outshine your local voice. And in addition to that, San Diego State is in a really bad position because they have multiple current Power 5 programs that people care about a lot more than they do about San Diego State. Again, within 2 hours, you got UCLA and USC, and then a little bit further away, and to a lesser extent, Stanford and California and Cal. But overall, San Diego State is not the biggest brand in their city. San Diego State cannot deliver San Diego because they are so outshone by all these other voices. I've got family members that live in San Diego. When I visited there a few years ago, I wore my Boise State gear. I was really excited for a little bit of maybe some rivalry, kind of back and forth. I didn't see a single person wearing San Diego State gear the entire time that I was in San Diego. Not one. And, we went all over the city. We did all the stuff. You went to the beach. We went and saw all the sights. I mean, we were all around that city. I didn't see a single one. I saw a lot of Power 5. I saw USC, UCLA. I even saw some East Coast teams. I didn't see a single San Diego gear there because their fans don't care. San Diego has almost 3 million people, but they don't care about San Diego State. And that shows in their attendance. Let's look at their attendance for their games in 2023, which I will have recognized was a bit of a down year. But it's the first year of their Snapdragon Stadium, their brand new stadium. 24,831 people out of a stadium capacity of 35,000 seats. 71% filled. Their TV viewership, okay, maybe people didn't want to go to the really poorly designed and hot stadium. Okay, I get that. TV viewership, however, 384,000. That is if you consider their 1.8 million views versus UCLA, which says a lot more about UCLA than it does about San Diego State. San Diego State, group of 5 program, smaller program. UCLA brings with it a much larger viewership. Most of those people were tuning in. So if you consider that number, if you allow that 1.8 million as part of San Diego State's viewership, 384,000, which is only 11% of what the city actually has to offer. And if you take out the UCLA 1.8 million, which was not representative. That was a variable that was not representative. That was an outlier, statistical outlier from the average viewership of San Diego State this season. Their numbers dropped to 244,800, which is only 7% of the San Diego area. Let's look at USF. USF, another great team that's been considered, right? No. USF is another program that is outshone by everybody in its area. Oh, and to mention San Diego State one more time, the San Diego State versus UConn game was the least watched final national championship game for basketball ever recorded. So again, San Diego State is not bringing in the viewership because the people don't care about the team. They don't have a consistent history of success, especially in football. They're a little bit of a stronger candidate than the other teams we're about to mention, but overall, they are not a strong program because they don't have that consistent history of elite success. They don't have that consistent history of building up passionate local fan bases. They are outshone by everybody in their local area. And USF is even in a worse case scenario because USF has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers inside of their city limits, and then the Miami Dolphins and Jacksonville Jaguars within inside the state. And then for Power 4s, you've got Florida, which is only a 2-hour drive, Miami, a little bit further away, 4 hours, UCF, rival 2 hours away, and then Florida State, again, a little bit 4 hours away. But 4 Power 5 or Power 4 now programs in your state competing with you that you are having to compete with for TV viewership. Their attendance and TV reflect that. Their attendance overall this season, while looking okay off the bat, 37,943. That looks okay when you look at it off the bat. But then you have to remember that they had an outlier. Alabama came. Alabama draws a large crowd. The Alabama people came to watch Alabama. They didn't come to watch USF. They came to watch Alabama, which is why, even though they were averaging 37,943 overall with Alabama, Alabama was 65,138 people. That was the show. People came for an opportunity to be able to watch a team that was potentially a national championship contender. Saban in maybe one of his last rides. There was a lot of history around that. People came to watch Alabama. They didn't come to watch USF. So if you take out the Alabama game, which again is not representative of what USF put up overall, their average attendance drops to only 32,504. Out of a stadium capacity, if we include the Alabama game, if we're gracious, which again did not represent what USF was capable of doing, but if we include the Alabama game, their stadium attendance, again, out of a stadium that is capable of holding 65,890 people, they only put up 37,943. That's less than 60% stadium capacity. And USF has recognized this. They've recognized that they don't draw in the Tampa area. They've recognized that they don't have a strong local loyal fan base. And their new stadium is only going to hold 35,000 people. Because while they may be in one of the best TV markets, the TV market doesn't care about them. Because the TV market has so many other options. So many other options that have already brought in the loyalty of the area. Who's going to care about USF when you have Tampa Bay that you can go watch? You just have to wait one day, and then it's Tampa Bay, and maybe you're doing some pre-party tailgating on Saturday. But who cares about USF when you have Tampa Bay right there? Who cares about USF when you have 4 other Power 5 programs, Power 4 programs in your state? Maybe Power 4 programs that you grew up being a fan of, and now you've moved to Tampa for, work reasons or just for area reasons, whatever they are, personal reasons. You probably brought that fanship with you. You're not switching your fanship to USF. It doesn't even matter if USF rises to a Power 4 conference. They're never going to outcompete those other programs, which have, again, such a further ahead edge, which is why those programs are already Power 4 or were selected ahead of USF. There's a reason USF hasn't been on the cutting block of expansion. There's a reason they haven't been part of those teams rising to the top until recently, because they just don't have a lot to offer besides their TV market, which they can't deliver. Their TV market for viewership this year, when you look at it right off the bat, it looks really, really good. One of the best in the group of 5, 927,000. But then you have to look at what actually happened. You have to look at the actual games. And then you realize that 4.84 million views came from one game versus Alabama. So you take that average of 927,000, you multiply that by the number of games that were Nelson rated, you take away that 4.84 million, and you are left with 144,400 views per game. That is it. The Alabama game people were tuning in to watch Alabama. Though you didn't have any other games that came even close to touching that number of viewership for USF. That is not representative of what they do on a typical basis. People tuned in to watch Alabama. They especially tuned in when Alabama was close to losing. Alabama was in a rough spot there. They almost lost. It didn't matter that it was USF. I mean, it could have been Richmond. The fact that Alabama was close to losing drew in a massive amount. Upset alert. That's on all, they're getting all the push out to all the channels. Alabama's on upset alert. People are streaming in to watch that game because of the potential that Alabama could lose. That's huge news. They're watching the circumstance. They're watching the possibility of a loss, and they're watching Alabama. They're not there to watch USF. I guarantee that you go through and you ask people about the Alabama game, and they remember that Alabama almost lost, most of them probably won't remember that it was to USF. They just remember that Alabama was close to losing, managed to pull it out. You take that game away, which again is not representative of what USF does on a typical basis, was not representative of their average overall. You take that one game away that gives them a great TV viewership, it's down to 144,400, one of the lowest TV viewerships in the group of 5 for top expansion candidates. One of the lowest overall, and the lowest that we're going to talk about today. That is 5% of the Tampa market. That is 5% of the total Tampa market viewing USF's games, because they don't care about them, because there are so many other teams to draw the viewership away. They're not a college town. They're not a town that has a small, local, very passionate fan base that is able to build on, expand that, and attract other viewers to them. They don't have that. They don't have this history of success. This was one of USF's best years in 6 years. Unlike San Diego State, which is having a down year, this was USF's best year in 6 years. USF's had 2 flash-in-the-pan seasons. That's it. That's it. In 24 years of football, they've had 2 really good years, and that's it. This is not a program with a history of success. This is not a program with a strong, passionate fan base. This is not a program that is able to deliver the Tampa market, and it never will be. It's never going to be a program because it's too far behind the curve and has too much competition. It is choked out by the weeds. When you have an NFL team in your city, and you were not there establishing yourself first and having a strong national brand first, you're never going to be able to outcompete the NFL team. They're always going to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans first and then maybe USF fans on the side, but honestly, probably not. And especially if you then go join an ACC or join some other Power 5 conference and are unable, it's a massive gamble. You have to hope if you bring USF into your conference that they're able to succeed from day one and do that for 3 or 4 consistent years and then not have any massive drop-offs, enough to start to pull people around. And maybe eventually in 5-10 years, if everything works out, you can start to deliver the Tampa market. But you're not going to be able to do that before then. And it is a massive gamble to go after a program that has not delivered the Tampa market or anything close to it so far, that doesn't have local buy-in, doesn't have people that actually care about its program so far, and just hope that the Power 4 label, which in the way that college expansion is going, we'll see if that even means anything in the future, but with the hope that the Power 4 label is enough to get people to start to buy in. It is a massive, massive gamble based on backwards TV thinking that doesn't reflect the modern digital age. One last team for comparison is UNLV. Again, another program that just had their best season, their best season in 40 years of this program. Their best season in 40 years. They went to the Mountain West Championship game, and yet this is another program that cannot deliver its market. They're competing with the Raiders. That's a big thing. They have the NFL. They have an NFL program in their city. They are not the biggest name in town. But beyond that, Vegas is an entertainment area. They're not coming for college football. It's not a college football town. You don't have that small local feel. Lots of local graduates who grew up and supported the team and a local. You don't have that local needed close-knit community. It is a party city. You have people that are coming for weekends, people that are moving there for business. Nobody's moving there with the thought of, I want to watch this local college team. If you walked around Vegas and asked people what they thought about UNLV, most people would probably say, who's that? This is not a team with a strong local presence. And it shows in their viewership. It is so hard. If you didn't have an NFL program there, just competing with the Vegas Strip, I mean, in Sin City, Vegas, that's not a great spot to try and build up a college football fan base. And it's tough even for the NFL viewership side of things, but it's especially tough for a college team to have to fight against that. Attendance-wise, out of a stadium that holds 36,800 people, 23,660 people. And that includes, that's per game, and that includes the Mountain West Championship game, which boosted their numbers, which was, again, Boise State coming to town. That's a big name coming down with a lot of outside travel. Mountain West outside fans traveling in. Mountain West Championship game of 31,473 people to boost their numbers. Even with that boost, they still weren't able to average more than 64% attendance for their program. Now, TV viewership, when you look at it initially, looks really good. 1.46 million. That's fantastic. That's awesome. That's better than anybody we've talked about. Even that's better than USF with their game versus Alabama. But, however, the issue becomes then that only 5 games were rated for UNLV this season. And when you look at 3 of them, they are outside factors. Michigan, bowl game versus Kansas, and the Mountain West Championship versus Boise State. 2.97, almost 3 million viewers for the game versus Michigan. That reflects Michigan's draw, not UNLV's. Kansas, bowl game, a Kansas team, one of the best team in decades, top 25, playing against UNLV. That is the draw. Kansas in the bowl game, not UNLV. 2.69 million. Mountain West Championship game, which was one of the lower viewed Mountain West Championship games. UNLV versus Boise State, 1.26 million. That says a lot more about Boise State. Boise State's the big brand, the draw for that program, because unlike these other teams that are small teams in their markets, Boise State is the top dog in their conference. They are the Alabama of the Mountain West. People are tuning in to watch Boise State. You take out those 3 games, UNLV averaged 190,000 people per game. These are outliers. Michigan, two Power 5 programs that drew in their own fans, and then a Mountain West Championship game versus Boise State. Those are not reflective of what UNLV does on an average basis, and especially when you compare that against their attendance. 190,000, that's a viewership of 6% of the Vegas area. 6%, that's all that UNLV was able to draw. So what really matters? What really matters is national brand. National brand is going to trump regional brand every single time. Because your national brand in the digital age, it's not about people that live nearby and want to watch you. It's about anybody that wants to watch you. How many eyes can you get on your screen? And right now, the potential is measured by TV antennas that are not turned on because nobody's watching through those anymore. Nobody is linked to the cables in the area anymore. They're watching over digital streaming. It doesn't matter how many people live near your school if you don't have a strong national brand. You have to be able to have a strong enough national brand that when people move to your city, they already know about you and are interested in potentially becoming fans of your team. Have been maybe following you a little bit, and now they're interested in being part. Just having a large city near you, that means absolutely nothing. National brand trumps the regional brand every time. Strong culture of on-field success. You need to have consistent winning seasons. A strong history of consistent winning seasons that builds a dedicated, passionate fan base that will be with you through the rough times because they were built up when it was strong and they've been there long enough that they have expectations for the future and they'll get you back on track. You have to have high watchability, which kind of goes back to our previous 2 factors, but exciting play style, winning, uniqueness, the blue turf. You've got to have unique watchability factors that make you a program the best in town and the best in the nation when you're on. People want to watch you. They want to tune in and see what the Blue Turf is doing. They want to see a team that's in the top 25. They want to see a team that's winning. They want to see a program that has a consistent history of success. As part of those top names, it's a household name. They did this in the past. Can they do it again? That's the kind of culture that breeds watchability. You have to, and more importantly, most important of everything else, you have to have a strong, passionate, highly dedicated local fan base community that can convert the new arrivals to your fan base. And that's most important for a large city. If you already have a massive national brand, it doesn't matter quite as much. That's the biggest draw, the national brand. How can you sell that brand, especially NIL era? How can you sell your brand? That's what's most important. But aside from that, if you're just simply a large city, do you have the kind of fan base that can draw others to it once they join your city? And all of that goes back to your team and its on-field success. It all comes down to on-field success, which is going to drive your viewability, your watchability. What are the facts for this? Boise State is the proof that proves the exception to the rule. They are the evidence that breaks the system. They are the evidence that shows the backwardness of the current mindset of expansion. Boise area, one of the smaller ones, less than 1 million people. Depending on where you look, somewhere between 700 and 800,000 people right now. It's rapidly growing, but it's still less than 1 million. All these other areas that we were talking about, north of or near 3 million. San Diego, Vegas, and Tampa. All of those in the range of 3 million people. Boise area, less than 1 million. Should be low viewership, right? Based on the traditional way of thinking. They just had their worst season since 1997. Their worst season. One of their worst seasons in school history. One of their worst seasons since 1997. UNLV, USF just had one of their best seasons. They should have massive viewership compared to Boise State, right? Boise State, one of their worst seasons, small area. However, one big factor that works for Boise State. There's no other competition in the state. Boise State's the best game in town. There's no NFL teams. There's no Power 5. Boise State is the game. They are able to draw in the entire state. And on top of that, they have the consistent history of success. And on top of all of that, they have the blue. They have the blue. When you have the blue, it's hard to lose because that is such a unique draw. That is such a makes you nationally relevant no matter what's happening. You have one of the most unique playing surfaces in the game of college football. You're one of the most unique programs in college football. And that is going to keep you relevant, and even when you're having down years, and keep bringing exciting players to your program. Like 4-star transfers from USC coming to your program. Number 1 JUCO transfers coming to your program. Top wide receivers from Power 5 programs coming to your program. That is what's going to keep you relevant, is the blue turf and your history of success on that turf. So Boise State, even though they have one of the smaller areas for TV antennas near the school, even though they had one of their worst seasons in 1997, just had their best attendance in school history. 35,867 people attended out of a stadium capacity of 36,387. 99% stadium capacity. And yeah, they had some big games, but they weren't outliers. They had UCF come. That was the biggest name. They sold over 36,000, but they sold over 36,000 3 times. And 2 of those were in conferences, San Jose State and Air Force. San Jose State's not a draw. Air Force is a little bit of a draw for us because they're a little bit of a rival. But those are not outliers. That's consistency. We put up our maximum attendance multiple times. Unlike USF, who did it one time with Alabama, which was reflective of Alabama, not USF. Boise State, people come to watch Boise State. They come to watch what the Broncos are doing right now, and especially with the investments that Jeremiah Dickey is putting into this program. TV viewership, 769,500 total. Now let's do the same thing we did to everybody else, okay? So let's take it in some of the outliers, okay? So 769,500 is if you consider bowl game as well. If you take out the bowl game, 590,000 average for the regular season. Let's take out the outlier because Boise State did play a playoff team. They played Washington, 1.97 million viewers on that. I would argue that, again, because Boise State's a bigger brand, a bigger national brand, that they are going to draw in a higher percentage of that viewership than a school like USF or San Diego State or UNLV that have been non-factors, completely irrelevant in the modern age of college football, or mostly irrelevant. San Diego State's had a couple good years, but mostly irrelevant in the modern age of college football. However, let's just consider that a complete outlier and take it out. It's also, for the sake of fairness, for the sake of fairness, we'll also take out the Mountain West Championship game for the overall number. However, before we do that, just taking out the overall outlier like we did with USF, that gives Boise State an average viewership of 417,500 people. Now, for the sake of comparison with UNLV, we did it for UNLVs, we'll do it for Boise, even though, again, Boise State is the main draw. You take out Alabama because Alabama is the main draw. People aren't tuning in to watch USF. You take out Michigan and Kansas because Michigan and Kansas are the main draws. People aren't tuning in to watch UNLV. You don't take out the Mountain West Championship game for Boise State because Boise State's the main draw. People aren't tuning in to watch UNLV. They're tuning in to watch Boise State. However, for the sake of fairness, let's also remove that game. 1.26 million viewers gone from that game as well. That still gives Boise State 297,142 viewers per game. By far beyond the average of any other team we've talked about so far. That all of these programs have been considered as better Power 5 expansion candidates than Boise State because of the city that they're in. Nothing to do with any facts or data or actual evidence. It's all projected potential off of the city that they happen to have their foundation in, not the fan base or the winning culture that their foundation is built in. It is a completely backwards system. Boise State's either drawing in 51% or 37% of their local area potential, and that is because of their national fan base, far more than any other percentage that we've talked about. 6% for UNLV, 5% for USF, by far the worst, 7% for San Diego State. As Boise State's local area grows, their potential to capitalize on that viewership, on that local viewership, is higher than any of these other programs. They can pull in a larger percentage and a larger number of their viewers because the percentage is so much different. They can it's so far apart. They can pull in a higher number of the massively increasing number of viewers coming to their area than any of these other teams can. So as the Boise area expands, it's actually a benefit for Boise State. Unlike these other teams that don't have a large brand, that aren't able to compete with either just the teams in their area or even the teams that people are bringing in with them as being previous and former fans. Boise State has a very passionate local fan community. They have a very exciting winning culture, and they have a national brand. All of those things can bring in people that come into the local area. So for Boise State, the local area numbers are actually a boost. Having a larger city, the larger it grows, is going to only help Boise State, unlike hurting these other teams. It actually hurts their potential because the market becomes oversaturated. Boise State's not going to become oversaturated. There's nobody else. It's Boise State. So the more people that come, the more chances that Boise State will have to increase their viewership. And beyond that, it's not about the regional area. It's about their national brand. Boise State will always draw a crowd, even when they are having one of their worst seasons in school history. They are still going to bring in a massive TV viewership because Boise State has the brand. And that is what is most important. So why, in the face of facts, the face of pure, honest, no bias evidence and facts, does nothing change? Does the system stay the same? Well, the main reason is that those in power are always going to be the most threatened by change and the last to change. I mean, changing the system, changing how you think about what makes a team valuable, potentially threatens the existence of some Power 5 teams. Maybe Rutgers doesn't look like such a hot commodity if you're not focusing on how many people happen to be near them and you're focusing on what their actual brand potential is. Imagine Boise State's putting up these numbers, again, in their worst season ever. Putting up these numbers in their worst season ever versus Group of 5 competition. Imagine if they had the Power 5 level to lift their viewership. If the other teams that you're associated with have higher draws, have higher national brands, you're going to be able to increase your own viewership overall because the Power 5 numbers lift everybody. Being associated with Power 5 is going to get you on better TV time slots. It's going to give you more bias for you in the rankings. They're going to get a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. And when it comes to ranking, and the higher you rank, the more viewership that you're going to get. You're going to get more views from people that are tuning in to watch the teams that you're playing because it's more exciting. Yeah, they're not tuning in because of any intrinsic value that you have, but they're tuning in to watch your circumstances. So take the intrinsic value that Boise State clearly has over every one of these teams and add it to a power conference where it can be lifted by the circumstances. And the roof is basically the limit. The ceiling is the limit for what Boise State is able to achieve, what Boise State TV viewership is able to achieve. And that lifts everybody. That lifts everybody inside the system and outside the system if you look at it with the correct mindset. But again, why does nothing change? Why? Obviously, money is the biggest motivator, right? So if money is the biggest motivator, why hasn't the mindset changed to look at where the most money actually is? Where the proven potential of these teams actually is versus projected potential based on outmoded models that no longer are relevant. The biggest factor overall is human stubbornness. When Major Alexander Savetsky, in his excellent strategic book, Victory Through Air Power, wrote, "Minds thoroughly trained and set in a certain direction automatically reject facts that do not fit into their accustomed mental patterns." There you have the issue overall, in one nutshell. They refuse to even consider the facts that are in front of their eyes because they are so honed in, so focused on outdated, outmoded practices that they grew up in, that were proven truths at the time, that they were raised in, a completely outdated, outmoded mindset that they are so deeply ingrained in, they cannot think without it. They cannot look beyond their own biases. They cannot clear the clouds of their own perception to look at the hard, raw data in front of them. They just keep hoping that the future will prove that the past is still true, when it is clear, the present is clearly showing that is not the case. Now, eventually, the opponents of Major Savetsky saw the error of their ways. It took a lot of failures for them to finally see the truths, and they were able to change. And maybe that hope exists in the world of college football. But it is incredibly frustrating to sit on the sidelines and to watch the slow and gradual decline of the greatest sport in the history of mankind, because those who are in power just do not get what actually makes this sport fun to watch and what actually builds up the profitable potential of this sport. It's a long, hard road of what may happen next, and hopefully things change, but at least you have an idea of the issues that exist in the current mindset. And the more people that become aware of the problem, potentially we have a better chance of that problem being fixed in the long run. So thanks so much for watching this video. I'm going to be doing another video talking about conference realignment recently. This was a little bit impromptu. I've been wanting to do this video for a long time, but this was... I was explaining this position so many times on Twitter, I decided, you know what, I don't want to have to say it over and over again. I'm just going to put it in a video format. I can refer people back to the video. But I have an actual planned video coming out on Monday talking about the future of the ACC, talking about the future of Clemson and Florida State, and how that could end up impacting the ACC, maybe the Big 12, potentially the Mountain West, group of 5 programs that could be added to the ACC in the future if things go the way that they are trending. A lot of exciting discussions going to be taking place with Brian from Clemson Football Live. Outstanding channel, great stuff. He's doing great stuff over there. He has a great perspective. I'm incredibly excited for that video. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for being part of this. I want to hear your thoughts. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that disagree with me, so put your comments in the video, in the comment section of the video, and I'll try to get through and discuss with all of you in that section. I love to be able to be part of that discussion because, again, the more that we talk about this, the better chance that there is that something can change. Change happens through discussion and the distribution of new ideas. That's how change actually eventually ends up happening. So I want to have that discussion with all of you. Put your comments in the comment section below. If you like the content, if you didn't like the content, but you thought that I was entertaining, I don't care. Make sure you like and subscribe. And thanks so much for being here and for viewing and being part of this. And again, I hope that you're all part of the discussion in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!